And so if it's agreeable to my colleagues, we'd like Senator McConnell to make an introduction. I know he has a very heavy, busy schedule. Welcome, Senator McConnell.
Thank you, Chairman McCain. Senator Reid, members of the committee, I'm exceedingly proud to be here today to introduce Robert Story Karem, and a very experienced and well-qualified nominee to serve as the next Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. Through his hearing, this committee will find an individual who's worked to prepare himself to address some of the major challenges facing our country. Because of his razor-sharp intelligence and diligence, Robert, a native of Lexington, Kentucky, rapidly moved up in my office from staff assistant to legislative correspondent and eventually to be my legislative assistant for foreign affairs. He proved himself a quick study, and I learned not to doubt his advice or his judgment. Robert also worked in my office when our nation experienced one of the most harrowing days in its history. He was hard at work on Capitol Hill on September the 11th, 2001, when our country was hit by the devastating al-Qaeda terrorist attacks. Witnessing this heinous attack on our country, including on our Pentagon, from this close vantage point, I know left a profound imprint on Robert and heightened his already keen appreciation of the seriousness of the threats confronting our nation. Robert was a stellar legislative staffer, and he advised me on a wide array of foreign policy issues. For instance, he played an important role in assisting me on matters related to Burma, something Chairman McCain and I have both been involved in over the years. The bipartisan sanctions effort, which led ultimately to the adoption of much-needed reforms. Burma has been and remains a bipartisan issue on Capitol Hill, and Robert played a significant role in our efforts in this regard in the early 2000s. He also provided vital assistance in staffing a congressional delegation I led to Afghanistan and Iraq back in 2003. Eventually, Robert left my office to work in the Bush administration as a special advisor for national security affairs and Middle East policy to Vice President Cheney, where Robert would work for a number of years. The Vice President evidently thought enough of Robert's skills that after he left office, he asked him to assist him in researching and editing his memoirs. Following his tenure with the Vice President, Robert's abilities drew the attention of House Majority Leaders Eric Cantor and Kevin McCarthy, both of whom Robert advised on national security matters. He later was the lead foreign policy staffer on the Jeb Bush campaign. Today, we face numerous security threats from around the globe. President Trump made an outstanding choice by nominating a man with both experience and ability to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. I'm looking forward to this committee's consideration of the nomination and to Robert's confirmation. The President simply could not have picked a better person for this office.
I thank you, Senator McConnell, for taking the time from your busy schedule to be here on behalf of this nominee. And I guess your message is that we need to confirm him or hire someone to start our car in the morning. Is that? Thank you. Representative Comstock, welcome. Punch the.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman McCain, Senator Reid, and members of the Armed Services Committee, thank you for having me here this morning for the great honor of introducing my fellow Virginian and friend of over 30 years, Mr. Kenneth Rapuano, to be Assistant Secretary of Defense, Homeland Defense, and Global Security. He is surrounded here today by his family, his wife Dixie, as well as his son Scott, a recent West Point graduate, and also a recent newlywed here with his wife. Also, Ken's daughter, Claire, who is joining the Peace Corps shortly, as well as another daughter, Taylor, and son Will. His proud mother, Kathy Rapuano, is also here, along with his brothers Richard and Dave, as well as sister-in-law Sarah. Mr. Chairman, this is truly a family of public service. Ken has my strong support based on my personal knowledge of his abilities, as well as his significant and stellar expertise in the areas covered by the Assistant Secretary of Defense position. Ken, a Marine, volunteered for 2 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, his previous service at the Pentagon in key areas, And then he's also had more recent service in positions of ever-increasing responsibility at the Department of Energy as the Deputy Undersecretary for Counterterrorism, focused on unconventional nuclear threats. Then he also went on to serve at the White House as Deputy Homeland Security Advisor to President Bush, where he chaired the interagency process developing and overseeing Homeland Security and counterterrorism policies. Ken has also worked in industry in these primary fields, with recent service in 2 key federally funded research and development centers at MITRE and ANSWER, supporting our government in the core areas of the position he's been nominated to. Mr. Chairman, Ken is fully prepared to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security by his lifetime of service and experience, his vast knowledge, and his hands-on experience in the field as well as in government agencies and, of course, across the globe. He's a diligent public servant who goes beyond the call of duty with great skill to defend our homeland. And I particularly appreciate his stepping up again, and I know it's always a family sacrifice too, so we really appreciate him stepping up in this new role, and I look forward to seeing him in his success again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for coming over, and appreciate your introduction. Thank you. It's my understanding that Chairman Thornberry wanted to be here, but he has another obligation to join us. But he wanted to join us this morning to introduce Ms. Bingen in person. So I'll insert his statement of support into the record. Simply note for the members of the committee that Chairman Thornberry writes that Ms. Bingen's commitment to public service will serve the Department of Defense and the nation well. So, welcome the witnesses this morning. We thank you for joining us. We also welcome your family and friends who are with us here today. As is our tradition, at the beginning of your testimony, we invite you to introduce those that are joining you today. It's a standard for this committee to ask certain questions in order to exercise its legislative and oversight responsibilities. It's important that this committee and other appropriate committees of the Congress be able to receive testimony, briefings, and other communications of information. So if you'll answer the following questions. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record and hearings?
Yes.
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communication, in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Bingen, the United States faces an increasingly complex global threat environment where terrorist organizations are metastasizing and exercising states-like capabilities, and nation-state adversaries are increasingly asserting power, often through irregular and asymmetric means. Every component of our Defense Department must have timely intelligence to understand the varied threats we face, to prepare for potential conflict, and to respond swiftly, accurately, and decisively when necessary. With persistent budget constraints, accurate and timely intelligence becomes all the more vital. We look forward to hearing from you as to how you will address this important mission if confirmed. Mr. Karem, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, is charged with a wide breadth of responsibilities, from security cooperation and foreign military sales to U.S. defense policy in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. We will be interested to hear from you on a number of issues: U.S. strategy for countering Russian aggression, what U.S. force posture in Europe should look like over the long term, U.S. strategy for defeating ISIS, and what the United States should be doing to create space for political solutions in Iraq and Syria, and much more. Mr. Rapuano, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense, and global security is responsible for a wide range of policy portfolios ranging from homeland defense, defense support of civil authorities, counter-WMD, cyber policy, and space policy. You have an extensive background in a variety of homeland security issues, both in government and in the private sector. I look forward to hearing you discuss how your previous experiences would inform your approach to these complex issues, especially the need for a U.S. policy and strategy in cyberspace. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to join you in welcoming the nominees this morning. Thank you for your willingness to serve our nation, and also let me express my gratitude to your family members who are here today and whose support to you throughout your careers has been so important. The nominees before the committee today have extensive experience and are well qualified for the positions to which they have been nominated. Ms. Kari Bingen, the nominee to be Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, is well known to this committee from her work as a senior staffer at the House Armed Services Committee. The Principal Deputy supports the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, who serves as the Principal Intelligence Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. The Undersecretary oversees all intelligence security organizations within the Department of Defense, including the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the National Reconnaissance Office, and the intelligence components of the combatant commands and military services. Throughout her work, both on the Hill and in the private sector, Ms. Bingen has substantial expertise in the areas of defense policy, strategic forces, and space policy. The nominee to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, Mr. Karem, also brings significant experience on defense and foreign policy issues, including as a foreign policy advisor to the Majority Leader and a Middle East expert in the White House to the Vice President. The Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs serves as the Principal Advisor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy and the Secretary of Defense regarding defense policy and strategy for Europe, Russia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Western Hemisphere. The position involves managing critical defense and security relationships with some of our closest allies and partners. Mr. Rapuano has had an impressive career in government service and private sector work in the areas of national security, counterproliferation, and policy analysis. He has previously served as a senior advisor on issues of homeland security and counterterrorism in the President George W. Bush White House, the Department of Energy, and Department of Defense. Mr. Rapuano has also served in the Marine Corps and as a Marine Corps reservist, served on the Iraq Survey Group. He has been nominated to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security, a position in which he would be charged with developing policy and overseeing planning for countering weapons of mass destruction, cyberspace, missiles.
The responsibilities of the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense.
We welcome your family members. Welcome.
Thank you. The responsibilities of the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs cover the vast majority of the globe and stretch across 5 combatant commands. It is impossible these days to open a newspaper without confronting bold-faced headlines about some conflict, crisis, or challenge with which the dedicated government servants and military personnel who work in ISA are already ably grappling. The national security challenges these quiet professionals confront every day are real, and they are sobering. If confirmed, it would be a great privilege to serve alongside these American patriots to help rebuild America's military capabilities and readiness, bolster and modernize critical alliances such as NATO, while rebalancing burden sharing within these alliances, strengthen U.S. credibility and influence in regions of key strategic interest, defeat ISIS and other terrorist groups, confront Russian and Iranian aggression, combat new cyber threats, and create the conditions favorable for safeguarding our national security and promoting America's economic prosperity. If confirmed, I look forward to working closely with this committee and with the Congress as a whole to address these and other national security challenges facing our nation. I'm grateful for your consideration of my nomination, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bingen.
Thank you. Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reid, and distinguished senators of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your consideration of my nomination to be Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. First, I would not be here without the strong support of my family, my husband, Sean, our 2 young sons, Henry and Harrison, and my parents, John and Rebecca. My father enlisted in the Army at 18, and both my grandfathers served in the Army during World War II. My time on the House Armed Services, and if confirmed, my role in the department is my opportunity to continue our family's tradition of service and to give back to our country.
Welcome to your family members.
Thank you. I wish to thank the President and Secretary Mattis for placing their trust and confidence in me. I am also grateful to several mentors who have helped shape my career, including Chairman Thornberry, Congressman Mike Turner, and retired Congressman Terry Everett, as well as to the HASC team and many of the staff behind you, who I've learned from and had the privilege to collaborate with in support of the NDAA. Henry Kissinger's statement before this committee in 2015 has stuck with me, that, quote, "The United States has not faced a more diverse and complex array of crises since the end of the Second World War," end quote. While threats increase, our military force structure has decreased. Thus, as Secretary Mattis has stated, we have less of a military shock absorber than we once did. This makes intelligence and a highly effective defense intelligence enterprise all the more critical to buy our leaders the time and space necessary to develop policy, posture accordingly, and resource capabilities. Keeping America safe and supporting our forces in harm's way is a humbling and solemn responsibility. If confirmed, my first priority will be to support the warfighter. We have troops today in harm's way in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere around the world. They deserve the best intelligence our nation can provide to protect them and to support their missions. Additionally, we must improve our defense intelligence posture and capabilities to better address the full spectrum of security challenges, particularly from near-peer challengers that range from high-end nuclear and advanced conventional threats to gray zone tactics in the cyber and information domain. The battlefield is more dynamic, and the defense intelligence enterprise must be more agile and adaptive, whether in its integration with operations, collection and analysis, or incorporation of new technologies and innovative concepts. Furthermore, I am reminded of the reason why the USDI was established in the first place. In the wake of 9/11, to improve the integration, management, and allocation of resources across a stovepiped enterprise. Integration and unity of effort across the defense intelligence enterprise is the value that this position brings to the Secretary, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Congress. I also recognize that collaborative relationships and motivated people focused on a clear mission are the foundation to implementing these priorities. It has been an honor working for the House Armed Services Committee, starting with the Strategic Forces and Intelligence Portfolio, and now as its Policy Director. I believe my time on Capitol Hill, coupled with my technical background and work in the private sector in support of several of the three-letter intelligence agencies, have uniquely prepared me for this position. If confirmed, I am committed to working with this committee and other committees of jurisdiction. I hope to earn your trust and confidence, and I am committed to providing you with the information you need to do your oversight. If confirmed, I also look forward to working closely with the new Undersecretary, once nominated and hopefully confirmed, and the great team in the USDI office and across the department. Thank you again for your time today and for your consideration of my nomination.
Thank you. Mr. Rapuano. Push the button that lights you up there.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the privilege of appearing before you today. I'd like to start by thanking my family. First of all, my wife, Dixie, who has been my best friend and partner for 28 years, and our 4 kids, who are all with us here today. Taylor, our oldest, who's currently studying at North Park University in Chicago to become a counselor. Scott, a West Point class of 2015 and currently an infantry platoon commander with the 3rd Infantry Division. And his wife, Katie, our brand new daughter-in-law and a very welcome addition to our family. And Claire, who last month graduated Phi Beta Kappa from James Madison University and is leaving next month for 2 years service in Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer. And finally, Will, who will be a 3rd year at University of Virginia this fall. He's on track to become a business major. He aspires to become a captain of industry someday.
Welcome.
Thank you. Dixie and I are extremely proud of our kids. Raising them has been the most important and rewarding role of our lives. I'd also like to thank my parents, Al and Kathy Rapuano. If it wasn't for their love, hard work, and perseverance, I am quite certain I would not be sitting before you today. Mr. Chairman, I've been working national security issues my entire career, and I believe that the threats that we face today are complex, unpredictable, and dangerous as any time in our history. The U.S. Homeland is no longer a sanctuary. The growing sophistication and proliferation of threats such as cyber, space, ballistic and cruise missiles, CBRN materials, endemic diseases, and unmanned technologies, combined with the growing number of nations and non-state actors with access to them, continue to increase risks to the homeland and defense mission assurance. I see no more important role in national security than serving in the position of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security, and focusing on ensuring the continuing ability to defend our nation against dynamic and evolving threats. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you and your staffs, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank the witnesses. And Mr. Rapuano, what do you think should be the key elements of our national cyber policy?
Senator, there's been a lot of focus on our cyber policy of late for very understandable reasons. The 17 NDAA, as you well know, has very specific directives with regard to development of a deterrence framework and policy. There was the recent Defense Cyber Deterrence Study that really got at the importance of tailored deterrence campaigns and the whole approach to a declaratory policy. I believe that we have got to have both what is perceived to be and what is actually effective cyber capabilities that will introduce such an element of doubt in the mind of our adversaries that the cyber attacks that they would be interested in taking to achieve some goal would be outweighed by the high likelihood of our response.
Ms. Bingen, as you know, we just had a very serious cyber attack worldwide. How well equipped are we intelligence-wise to anticipate or even adequately respond to this kind of really unprecedented activity?
Mr. Chairman, I believe this continues to be a challenge within the intelligence community writ large, but also particularly in the defense intelligence enterprise. We continue to need the capabilities to detect and attribute where these attacks are coming from, to understand the totality of them, but also to think more strategically about where is this headed. We look at each individual event as a more tactical event, but the challenge for the defense intelligence enterprise is putting it all together. And as we look to stand up U.S. Cyber Command, our challenge is also from an intelligence perspective, how do we support that command's responsibilities, military plans, and operational capabilities? And I believe that that's a very important area that we need to do a better job in, sir.
Mr. Karem, what lesson do you think that Putin's learning, since there seems to be a significant lack of an international response to his actions in Ukraine and Syria, obviously other cyber activities that emanate from Russia? What kind of a lesson do you think he's learning from what seems to be rather successful activities from his standpoint?
Senator, I believe that Russia's interference, invasion, and continued illegal occupation of Ukraine poses a significant threat to international security and our own, and his actions in Syria have also contributed to that problem. I do not believe he is sufficiently, that Vladimir Putin is sufficiently deterred from perpetuating similar and continuing malign activities.
Well, I believe that all three of our nominees are highly qualified and much needed, very frankly. I regret that Secretary Mattis does not have the team around him that he needs to do his job in the most efficient fashion, and we will expedite your nominations following a vote of the committee as quickly as to get you to work as quickly as possible. I view all three as highly qualified. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, I've been impressed with the witnesses' not only experience but their discussions in the office. So thank you all very much. Mr. Karem, we have seen since last year Russian, or in fact years before that, Russians' involvement in elections, particularly our own election. Do you agree with the assessment that the Russian activity interfered with the 2016 presidential elections by our intelligence community?
Sir, I have read the unclassified assessment from the intelligence community, and I agree with it.
And do you feel that this is an ongoing threat, not just a historical incident, but an ongoing threat that you'll have to deal with?
Senator, I believe the Russians, like the Soviets, have a long history of engaging in active measures against their adversaries. And I understand that the Director of National Intelligence has testified recently that these activities continue.
And Mr. Rapuano, the same question about your sense of the Russian involvement in our elections and other elections. Is it a credible and growing threat?
Senator, yes, I believe it is. I believe that they're going to continue doing it as long as they feel it's in their interest and the consequences are less than the benefits than they're accruing.
And how do you believe we're postured to counteract these operations that they're conducting in a larger sense to participating in the type of information?
Stakeholders, their respective roles, responsibilities, authorities, and resources, and then what are the threats, how we prioritize them, and how do we weave them together to make for a very effective set of policies and capabilities and actions.
Where do you think that level of coordination has to be? Because, again, it's not just DOD, it's the Department of Energy, it's the Department of Homeland Security.
I think ultimately the White House has a very important marshaling role in the National Security Council staff.
And they should be coordinating, leading an effort to come up with doctrine as well as organizational changes and personnel augmentations or movements. Is that fair?
I believe they should be setting those expectations. I believe that the executive order issued by the President last week goes a long way to identifying the challenges and setting in motion the steps to start to identify the issues that need to be addressed.
Mr. Karem, quickly, any comments in this regard?
Yeah, Senator, I agree with Mr. Rapuano's assessment with respect to the U.S. government. I would only add that the problem is magnified when you look at the threat that these activities pose to our allies. And so there would need to be coordination, not just among the U.S. government, but with our allies. NATO's Cyber Center of Excellence is a step in the right direction, but clearly there's more work that needs to be done.
Thank you. And Ms. Bingen, we had a chance to talk on this topic in the office, and that is, particularly after the OPM database breach, there was a huge shift back to DOD, but now we have a backlog of 600,000 people in terms of just getting cleared so we can have the people to do these jobs we've been talking about. First, do you agree that this is a significant problem that DOD faces and that it's essential that we deal with this very quickly and very effectively?
Senator, I absolutely agree with that. And of that 600,000, most of those are DOD personnel awaiting a background investigation or update.
Now, we've mandated that DOD provides a plan to transfer completely the mission back from OPM. And I would assume that you are going to be one of the chief architects of this plan. And I also assume you're going to hit the ground running. So those are fair assumptions, correct?
Absolutely, Senator. The NDAA last year, as you fully know, sir, requires a plan by August 1st on that transfer. And so that is something that I absolutely, if confirmed, would have to hit the ground running and focus on meeting that deadline and providing you the information that you need, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to all three of you, congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for your willingness to serve the country, continue to serve the country at this critical time. Mr. Karem, I want to start with you because I very much appreciate that you have been a supporter of the Special Immigrant Visa Program that has helped those who helped us in Iraq and Afghanistan, and as I'm sure you're aware, while the Iraq program is almost to completion, the program in Afghanistan continues. There are many people in the queue who helped us who would like to come to the United States. Can you talk about why you think this is important?
Senator, thank you. I first want to recognize your leadership on this issue and that of the chairman and the ranking member. When I served in House leadership, I was proud to get to work with your staffs on both the Iraq and Afghanistan special immigrant visa programs to make sure they were extended, and believe very strongly that the United States should be no better friend, and there should be no better friend and no worse enemy. If confirmed, however, the portfolio for ISA would not include Afghanistan, but for the NATO component. So this program would not fall under my jurisdiction. But as you know, I've been a long time believer that we need to stand by those who've risked their lives alongside our soldiers.
Well, thank you, and I very much appreciate Secretary Mattis's support for the program as well. Let me follow up on the questioning that Senator Reid started around NATO, and you were answering that you think the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at NATO is important as we look at how we can better, with NATO, address the cyber threats to ourselves and the allies, the NATO allies. Can you expand a little more on what you would like to see NATO do with respect to cyber threats?
Yes, Senator. I think there are a couple pieces, and there are obviously things the United States can do to increase its deterrence. But with respect to NATO, all of our allies have an obligation under Article 3 to increase their national resilience. Some nations in the cyber realm have done more than others. The Estonians are real leaders in this regard, and it's no surprise that the Cyber Center of Excellence is located in Tallinn.
I've had a chance to visit there. It's very impressive.
It is. So there are investments in cyber security technologies. There is making budgetary decisions and really changing the culture so that we prioritize this. If confirmed, I'd really want to get a little more deeply into this subject and work with our NATO partners on it.
Great. Ms. Bingen, you're going to be responsible for or have intelligence gathering as part of your portfolio, as I understand what you will be doing. How important is the intelligence sharing that we do to our allies in helping us to get the information that we need to take actions?
Senator, I believe it's incredibly important. Nearly every military operation that we undertake today is done in a coalition, and so it is incredibly important that we be able to provide our coalition partners intelligence information, but also they be able to provide us information as well. At the end of the day, for the same mission, to protect our collective national security.
And how important to that effort is it that people believe that when they share that intelligence, it will continue to be confidential in the United States with those people who are going to act on it?
Senator, if confirmed, it is, as principal deputy, it is my responsibility to safeguard classified information and safeguard our sources and methods, including those from our allies and partners.
And it's important to our allies that that be the case. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Rapuano, in thinking about cyber, what we've seen with some of the breaches within DOD have been with respect to the contractors that we work with. Do you have thoughts about what more we can do to ensure that our contractors are doing everything possible to make sure that they are not susceptible to cyber threats and that they maintain secure networks?
Yes, Senator. The contractors are a very important component of the total force, and if they have vulnerabilities and ability for adversaries to access their systems, it really weakens the entire system. So looking at their IT, the level of modernity, how often, frequent, what are their policies for patches and other security measures is critical, and that's an area that, if confirmed, would be a higher focus for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The discussion of cyber policy, I don't want to say I laughed, but I felt a sense of irony because we've probably spent more time on cyber policy and cyber issues in this committee than any other single issue in the last year or so, but there is no cyber policy. And I realize that you all are not at the level where you will be setting that policy, but I hope you will be a continued irritant within the administration, and this spans this administration and the prior administration. We've got to get to the point where we have a doctrine and a policy and a clear deterrence strategy. We don't have that now, and I hope that this is something that, for example, in your list, Mr. Karem, you're looking at international security. The most likely attack is a cyber attack. And we have so many warnings that keep coming. It's the longest windup for a punch in world history, and we're still not ready. So I hope that each of you will take very seriously the necessity of a consistent overall government and non-government strategy and doctrine for dealing with this issue. I just hope you'll take that on. Mr. Karem, more specific question. What's your recommendation for our long-term military posture in Iraq after the defeat of ISIS?
Senator, I believe there are ongoing discussions between the United States and Iraq about a longer-term U.S. presence after the defeat of ISIS. I think our objectives in Iraq should be to make sure that Iraq remains a long-term strategic partner in the fight against terrorism, and that Iraq remains free from Iranian malign interference. The precise mechanics of what that relationship looks like and the authorities under which it occurs, I think, are under negotiation. And if confirmed, I would want to work with counterparts throughout the interagency and with the Congress on what those mechanics should be.
But I take it would be your recommendation that some kind of total disengagement would not be good policy.
Yes, sir. I believe history would caution against walking away from our partners.
Thank you. Ms. Bingen, do you you're part of a much larger intelligence community as in your position. Do you see areas of redundancy and opportunities for a better coordination, cooperation, and perhaps even efficiency in terms of the 17 agencies that are involved in the United States government in intelligence matters?
Yes, Senator. Right off the bat, I think that there is an opportunity for greater airspace integration, and I know we continue to have these discussions, but it's an area that we have not made as much progress on as I would have expected. So airspace integration, more integration on the ground in terms of their processing, exploitation, dissemination capabilities, and bringing in whether it's commercial technologies or other technologies out there. There is a lot of data right now out there, and whether it's full motion video or other, that our analysts are frankly spending more time searching for that data than they are doing the analysis. So I think that there are some opportunities to integrate not only better across the defense intelligence enterprise, but also in support of that national intelligence community enterprise as well.
Will you participate in your position as a member of the intelligence community, or is that General Stewart? How does the structure work?
Yes, Senator. One of the jobs of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and as Principal Deputy, if confirmed, I would support that, is it is dual-hatted as the Director of Defense Intelligence and Principal Advisor to the DNI for military intelligence matters.
So you will be engaged in those discussions?
Absolutely, sir, if confirmed.
Mr. Rapuano, what do we need to do to ensure defense of the homeland from the growing threat of missile attack from North Korea? How do you feel about the state of our missile defense? This is a key area. It seems to me it's becoming more important every day, literally every day.
Senator, missile attack is not directly in my portfolio, but clearly it's a growing threat, specifically with regard to North Korea. There are a number of systems that we have in place, both in terms of our capability to detect and track these systems, as well as to engage and defeat them. I think it would be difficult without going into a closed hearing to get into some of those details, and I haven't been fully briefed on them, but I certainly recognize your concern, and that would be an area of focus should I be confirmed.
Thank you. And my time has expired, but another area I think that it's important to pay attention to in a changing environment, which is the Arctic. in the absence of Senator Sullivan this morning, I'll carry the water for him. It's an incredibly important area. The opening up of the Arctic Ocean is the equivalent of the discovery of the Mediterranean Sea. It's a new body of water that's never been available for human activity in human history. And the implications in terms of national security are very serious. So I hope each of you in your respective areas will be thinking about that as an important part of the development of American doctrine and strategy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cotton.
I share Senator King's concern about